feels kind of strange to say this, but that sound, that's the sound of a Hyundai. I know. But the brand spanking new 2018 Hyundai i30N doesn't just sound good, it does plenty of other things pretty damn well. Let's check it out. If you haven't already heard, the i30N is a pretty big deal for Hyundai, and that's because it's the South Korean brand's first foray into the hot hatch segment, a move that Volkswagen first did back in 1976 with the original Golf GTI. Finished in performance blue, a colour that is probably familiar to fans of Hyundai's i20 WRC car, the i30N looks significantly tougher than any other i30 that's come before it. There's this aggressive front bumper with deep intakes, these vents here, and these cool air guides, I'll show you, which go all the way through to cool the brakes. There's this N-stamped plastic honeycomb style grille with this silver surround here and this red trimmed front lip there, which I quite like. There's also LED headlights and LED daytime running lights. You get gloss black wing mirrors with indicators inbuilt and these plastic side skirts with the N stamp on them as well. You also get these 19-inch alloy wheels wrapped with 235/35 Pirelli P0 tyres. Now, extra touch, I'm going to go to this back one here. If you look on the wheel, each wheel actually has its own embossed N logo on it as well. Inside the wheels, you've got some pretty decent brakes. Up front, you've got single piston calipers. You can see the red N stamped caliper there. These are 345mm ventilated discs up front. And at the rear, again, a single piston caliper without an N stamp on it, and these are 314mm ventilated discs. If we move to the back, you can see that the i30N has a pretty squat stance to the thing. It's a bit menacing from the back end, and that's helped by the fact that this car sits 8mm lower than a standard i30. At the back, there's again quite an aggressive rear bumper. There's this red accented rear diffuser, dual exhausts, LED tail lights, and at the top here, this pretty cool gloss black rear wing. I think it looks quite good. It's sort of highlighted by this triangular stoplight there. And that again is split, so you get the airflow all the way through there. There's also this rather chunky roof mounted shark fin style antenna there as well. Now, the Hyundai i30N is no Ford Focus RS, but if you're thinking of buying one, know this: if you purchase it, you are scoring yourself 19 N logo badges. We're talking 10 on the outside, 7 on the inside, 1 under the bonnet, and 1 on the key fob. Speaking of inside, if we have a look inside the i30N, it's important to remember that this car is cheaper than a Golf GTI, and I say that because there are some elements that definitely feel that way. That said, this particular car has been fitted with Hyundai's optional luxury pack, which means it gets a bunch of really good stuff. There are these heated sport seats with blue stitching. There's also N branding on the backrest. There are suede inner here with leather side bolsters there. Now, these are power adjustable as well. They're 12-way power adjustable with electric lumbar support as well. And there's a little release there so that you got the adjustable thigh support. As I said, these are optional, and they're also got a memory function as well. If we jump in, you can see that there's a plain plastic manual handbrake lever there and more blue stitching on the gear boot for the manual shifter with, of course, its own N logo. There's this nice leather steering wheel here, no flat bottom, just round, again with an N badge on it. There's more blue stitching along the inside there. Now, as you can see, there's a raft of buttons on this steering wheel, which we will talk about shortly. But first, I wanted to show you the 8-inch touchscreen, which has satellite navigation, as well as DAB digital radio, Bluetooth connectivity, and support for Apple CarPlay. and support for Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. It's all tied to a 6-speaker stereo, and the system generally works quite well. There are sort of pages and pages of menus if you decide to scroll through it. One of my favorite things though is this little custom button, and you can preset whatever thing that you want the custom button to act as, which is quite cool. It's that little star button there, which means for me, I've got it for my favorite preference, which is turning the screen off. There's dual zone climate control. There's also storage underneath here. You've got two 12-volt outlets as well as auxiliary and USB connections, and that's actually a wireless charging mat too. You've got two rubber lined cup holders here, and there's this, again, blue stitched center console bin there, although it's fairly unexciting in there and not all that deep. The door pockets aren't a bad size either, if a little bit shallow, and the glove box is a pretty good size. Unfortunately, the user manual isn't particularly special. There's a black headliner in the i30N, and there's also, of course, a felt-lined sunglasses holder up there. But overall, the interior's, to be honest, fairly plain and black. The door trims are all black. The materials aren't bad, but there's not a lot of splashes of colour or anything going on. There are, down near my feet, these alloy sports pedals, which are a nice touch, but as you can see, the floor mat as well, it's just a plain black floor mat, and even the blue stitching that it does have doesn't actually match the blue of all the other blue stitching in the cabin. There are front and rear parking sensors though, 7 airbags, lane keep assist, a driver attention alert, autonomous emergency braking, and a forward collision warning, as well as an auto dimming rear view mirror, rain sensing wipers, non-adaptive cruise control, and a slightly out of focus rear view camera. With all of that out of the way, I can show you just exactly what's going on with this steering wheel and some other cool stuff. So on your left hand side, you've got your stereo volume, your phone controls, and on your right hand side, you've got your cruise control functions here and also your rev matching button on and off there. But what I want to show you is this little page button there. You can scroll through different things on your display on the instruments here. So straight away, you've got your normal digital speedo, which is handy. You've got your trip information as well, which is all good to have. If we scroll across the top here now, there's no nav that we've got organized at the moment, but that's where it would normally be. So you've got your nav. If we go to the next page though, this is where things get a little bit more interesting. So we've got these digital readout gauges that you can bring up here for oil temp, torque, and turbo. If we scroll down, you can also bring up a lap timer. There's also a G-force meter. That's for your lane departure systems. So they're both off at the moment. That's where they would normally display. And your tire pressure, which you've got to be moving in the car for it to display your tires. But that's kind of, again, handy that you've got all those things. But scroll again, another page, and you enter a world of options that is genuinely pretty crazy. So your driving assist menu, you can get into your lane keeping assist system, your driver attention alert, your autonomous emergency braking, so you can turn that on or off, your forward collision alert, all of that stuff is through there. But you've got your doors, you can choose if you want automatic lock and unlock. Your lights, if you want your one-touch turn signals to flash 3 times, 5 times, or 7 times, you can choose all that. Your welcome light, you can choose all of that. How loud you want your parking assist beep to be. The lovely little welcome chime, which you can select to have on or off. If you go into convenience, you can adjust to have your power seat to slide all the way back for you when you first open the door, so it's easy to get in and out. You can have wireless charging, your auto rear wiper if you want that to go on automatically when you are in reverse, your shift light recommendations, you can choose to have those. Go into other features, there's still more things. You can have your fuel economy to automatically reset. You can adjust your temperature units. You can adjust your boost pressure units if you want. You can adjust your torque into foot-pound or newton meters, whatever you like, and same with your tire pressure. There are so many different options here. It is insane. And then when you think you can't play with more things, you've got your drive mode button here. Now, you'll see on the display, you've got between normal, sport and eco mode, so you can play with those. And then on the other side you've got this flag, and the checkered flag will bring up N mode and N mode custom. Now as you cycle through, those different driving modes also pop up on your touchscreen depending on which one you select, and you'll see when you select custom you can go into your settings. So trying to keep this as brief as possible, you've got your powertrain, so for engine you can adjust between normal, sport or sport plus. You've got rev matching, which you can choose to have off, normal, sport or sport plus. If we scroll into the limited slip front differential that the car has, you can choose between normal or sport for that. The exhaust sound, you can choose between normal, sport or sport plus for that. It's pretty ridiculous, but that's not all. Go into chassis and you can play with the adaptive suspension, so you can have normal, sport or sport plus. You can go into your rack mounted motor driven power steering system and again adjust that through normal, sport or sport plus. The stability control, you can adjust that too between normal, sport or completely off. It is just ridiculous. Very, very cool, but ridiculous. And in all, Hyundai says there are 1,944 different custom mode variations available, which is crazy. Then once you've got everything set up to just how you want it, if we go back to N mode, we can bring up this other screen here. You've got your performance timer, G-force meter, your turbo, your torque, and your power output. But click through on these things and you can bring up not only your lap timer, but an acceleration meter. If we go back, you can bring up your G-force, you can get a graph of what you're looking at there. Go back, same thing for the turbo. You can have a graph looking at all the data that you want to look at. Look at your torque. How about a graph? What about power? Why don't you have a graph? It just goes on and on. Quickly moving to the back, and we'll sneak in here and show you you've got more suede, more leather, more blue stitching as well. There's a fold down center armrest there with two cup holders for you in the back. You've got netted mat pockets. The door pockets are a little bit shallow, but they're there at least. Legroom isn't too bad, but there are no rear air vents, which is a little bit of a shame. Now, the rear seats though are 60/40 split fold, helping to expand the 381 litre boot to 1287 litres. You may have also noticed this interesting little rear chassis brace here. Now Hyundai says that it discreetly sits behind the rear seats. You can actually take it out, which is, I guess, good. I'd rather just take out the rear seats instead of taking out the rear chassis brace, but that's quite cool. There's also a cargo net there, and underneath the floor, a space saver spare tyre. We've also got two luggage hooks, one on each side, as well as that extra 12-volt outlet. Pretty handy. Exclusively tied to a 6-speed manual transmission and an electronically controlled mechanical limited slip front differential. Under the bonnet is a turbocharged 2-litre 4-cylinder G4KH engine, spitting out an impressive 202 kilowatts of power at 6,000 RPM and 353 Newton meters of torque from as low as 1450 RPM. Although the latter can rise to an even higher 378 Newton meters thanks to an 18-second hit of overboost. Hyundai claims the Czech Republic-built front-wheel drive i30N can hit 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 6.2 seconds before topping out at 250 kilometers an hour. Believe it or not, the very first car I learned to drive in was an early 90s red automatic X2 Hyundai XL. If you don't know what that is, Google it, but it's about as far from fast as you can possibly imagine. Well, I am pleased to say that Hyundai has come a long way since then, because this thing, this thing is properly quick. before you ask, the N stands for Hyundai's R&D Center in Namyang in Korea, but it also conveniently is a nod to the Nürburgring in Germany, where Hyundai says it spent more than 10,000 kilometers testing and developing this car to make sure it was right. And a huge part of getting it right is the i30N's suspension. Not only was it honed for global markets, it was specifically revised for Australian roads. Why? Because they're terrible. Hyundai says they designed, built and tested 11 different front dampers and 9 different rear dampers before settling on this final state of tune. And with McPherson struts up front and a multi-link rear end working together with those Pirelli tyres and the electromechanical limited slip front diff and those adaptive dampers, it all comes into play to give the i30 an incredible amount of compliance while still giving it loads of dynamic ability. At between 1429 and 1509 kilograms, depending on spec and options, the i30N isn't super light, but it's still so playful and seriously agile around this tight, twisty little circuit. In terms of track, the front end of the i30N is actually 7mm wider than a standard i30, and that wider footprint really helps with some precise turn in and impressive direction changes. This engine, wow, this engine has got serious poke. The power's a bit progressive, doesn't just throw you back in the seat, but the wall of torque that accompanies it is more than you probably expect, even from a 2-litre 4-cylinder like this. And it definitely feels faster than something like a Golf GTI. Those pops, it's like there's small arms fire going on in the boot. It's excellent. It builds pace deceptively quickly too. You put your foot down, you think, yeah, it's doing all right, and then you look down at the speedo and you're like, yeah, actually, that's not bad. Something I'm not a huge fan of is this gearbox. It's got some strengthened internals and it's tied to carbon fiber synchromesh rings, which is cool, and I'm sure in terms of reliability and longevity it's a good thing, but it's just a little bit too snickety for my liking. It's just a personal preference. It just doesn't quite go in super smooth. But wow, as a package and for the price, what an impressive little unit. So is the i30N any good? You bet, it's a lot good. But what I love most about this car isn't just the way it drives or how it sounds. What I love is what it signifies. This is not just another car, and it's certainly not just another Hyundai. Whatever you may have thought of Hyundai in the past, rest assured this first i30N, it's the real deal. And given the Volkswagen Golf GTI's 8th generation is fast approaching, if Hyundai can stick to their guns, the i30N can be a genuine hot hatch to watch out for. We've got an empty racetrack all to ourselves for a little bit longer, so I'm gonna do a couple more laps, but please, if you've got any questions at all, leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. And remember to subscribe. See you next time.